Every day we hear so much about what's going wrong with the planet, but what about what's going right? Well, whilst we go for a hike along the Grand Canyon track here in the Blue Mountains, I'll tell you about a heap of positive news from all around the world that you might have missed to hopefully brighten up your day. And our first story is actually regarding Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. As you all know, Trump has withdrawn the United States from the Paris Agreement again, but what you might not have heard is that a billionaire has stepped up to fill the funding gap left by the departure. The withdrawal will take around a year to be finalised, however when complete the US will join Iran, Libya and Yemen as the only 4 countries in the world not formally part of the agreement. This departure is a major setback, not just for international climate diplomacy, but also for the developing nations that rely on the crucial climate funding generated by the agreement. But here's the good news. Since the announcement of the US's retreat, Michael Bloomberg announced that Bloomberg Philanthropies, along with other US climate funders, will cover the funding gap entirely, ensuring the UNFCCC remains fully funded. And believe it or not, this isn't the first time that this has happened, as when Trump previously withdrew from the agreement in 2020, Bloomberg stepped in then with a $15 million commitment. And while Bloomberg's contribution is incredible, he's not the only one stepping up, as over 2,800 states, tribal nations, local governments, communities and universities have pledged to continue working towards the US's Paris Agreement commitments, despite the country not currently being a signatory.
Remember my name.
As this is the first good news hike, I should probably introduce myself. So my name is Dom, and for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been creating content primarily for Instagram, trying to highlight all the incredible people and organisations that are doing amazing things to protect our planet. And so on top of all of that good news, every month now I'll also be doing one of these good news hikes where I can go into a bit more detail and then also just cover some completely separate stories that I don't get to during the week. And yeah, I just feel like the perfect spot for a news show about the planet is out here in nature, out on the trails. So yeah, we'll try to be doing these once a week or once a month. If you have any recommendations for hikes, please do let me know. But let's just get back into the good news. And speaking of the Paris Agreement, this next story is about how Paris was able to halve its air pollution. So over the past 2 decades, Paris has been quietly transforming itself from a city once choked with traffic and pollution to now becoming a model for urban sustainability with cleaner air, safer streets and more green spaces. Historically, Paris's 1 million cars regularly drove the city's air pollution to levels above EU health limits, and each year poor air was attributed to 3,400 premature deaths. So, largely driven by Paris's first female mayor Anne Hidalgo, the city has progressed a bold and aggressive plan to clean up its air, including a commitment to become fully cyclable by 2026. For example, Paris is replacing 60,000 parking spaces with trees, created over 100 car-free streets, and added 1,300 kilometres of bike lanes, along with simpler efforts such as opening bike repair workshops in each district and funding widespread bike lessons for kids. And as a result of the efforts around much of the city, the number of cyclists has doubled during peak hour, and on some roads the number of bikes now outweighs cars. But perhaps the most powerful result is that Paris's air pollution has fallen by 50% since 2005, and the number of premature deaths linked to poor air quality has dropped by a third. Now we're changing tack a little bit for this next story, which is all about how abandoned golf courses can be rewilded, including one example of how an old course is now being used to protect homes from flooding. So across the US since 2006, more golf courses have closed each year than opened, which given the amount of fertilizers, pesticides and water consumed is definitely not a bad thing for local ecosystems. And now when these courses shut down, non-profits, universities and even local communities are stepping in to reclaim the land and turn it into a natural ecosystem that benefits more than just golfers. And a great example of this is the Clear Lake Golf Course in Houston that was surrounded by residential developments that would flood every time there was a heavy downpour simply because there wasn't enough stormwater infrastructure. When the course closed, developers wanted to turn it into another high-density neighbourhood, which would have just made the flooding worse, but instead the local water authority stepped in to transform it into a network of lakes capable of storing 500 million gallons of rain. In 2017, just as the first retention lake was nearing completion, Hurricane Harvey dropped 50 inches of rain on the area, and thanks to this new lake, flooding was prevented in the nearby homes which would have otherwise been inundated. Today, the 200-acre site is home to 5 stormwater lakes along with 40 acres of wetlands and parks, bike paths and sports fields, benefiting both wildlife and residents, all the whilst protecting 3,000 homes.
Remember my name. If I packed all my things and never saw me again, would you remember that day? That we laid out in the rain. Oh.
Now this next story is mind-blowing as it's about the world's largest tree, and I can safely say that it is much bigger than any of these behind me. So when I said the world's largest tree, giants like General Sherman or Hyperion might have jumped to mind. However, the real answer is this, an entire aspen grove called Pando. At first glance it looks like a normal forest, but if you take a closer look down to the genetic level that is, you'll find that it's actually one massive tree that covers over 106 acres of Utah's Fish Lake National Forest. Pando is an aspen clone made up of 47,000 genetically identical stems that are all interconnected underground and likely started growing from a single seed at the end of the last ice age and has been expanding ever since. What's even more mind-blowing, Pando isn't even the biggest organism in the world and it is not close. Second place goes to a colossal pathogenic fungi that was discovered in Oregon's Blue Mountains by researchers studying tree die-off in the area. Using satellite imagery and DNA sampling, they mapped the edges of the fungi and found it to cover an astonishing 2,300 acres. And based on that size and the known growth rates of the species, it's estimated to be between 2,400 and 8,650 years old, making it one of the oldest known organisms as well. However, taking the crown as the largest organism on Earth is the shark-based seagrass meadow in Western Australia, which trumps the fungi by a whopping 47,000 acres and is over 450 times larger than Pando. It was discovered in 2022 by scientists who set out to study the diversity of seagrass in the area, only to realise it was genetically all one plant that has been cloning itself for around 4,500 years. As I said at the start, I'm doing the Grand Canyon track here in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, Australia, which, according to YouTube, is the most popular park or most popular hike in the park. And I'm sure from all the B-roll and everything behind me, I'm sure it's no surprise why that might be the case. But besides showing off these incredible landscapes and vegetations, I also in these videos want to do my best to spotlight some Australian wildlife. Now, I haven't had any luck so far today. Either they've flown away before I could pull my camera out, or there just hasn't been that much in general, partly because the vegetation is just so dense here, and then also with it being the most popular trail, there are a few people around today, but I'll do my best and see what I can show you guys. Now this next bit of good news comes out of the UK, where the government has recently announced its ambition to increase its offshore wind capacity from 14 gigawatts up to as much as 50 in the next 5 years. And while this is fantastic for clean energy, there's a problem, which is that with today's technology, that will likely also see a significant increase in the amount of bird fatalities. Estimates of the amount of birds killed by the UK's turbines vary from 10,000 to 100,000 each year, which at the upper end averages out to just over 8 bird deaths per turbine per year. And while this is still far lower than the 55 million eaten by the country's domestic cats or the millions killed as a result of fossil fuel power generation, it is still significant and must be lowered. However, a Norwegian study found that simply painting just one blade black reduces bird collisions by 70%, likely because the black blade creates a flickering effect against the white tower, catching the bird's attention. And supported by that evidence, the UK government recently unveiled its plan to paint the blades of its offshore wind turbines in the North Sea. And as the Norwegian study only included 8 turbines, this pilot project could provide some crucial evidence that would likely see a worldwide response if proven to be an effective solution. It's unclear exactly how many turbines will be involved in the trial. However, what we do know is that it will start in 2027, span 4 years, and assess the effectiveness of different designs such as completely painted blades versus ones with stripes and even UV coated ones. Staying on the topic of preventing bird collisions, now I want to tell you about how these tiny dots are literally saving thousands of lives from what was once America's deadliest building for birds. So according to this report from the United Nations, over 40,000 deceased birds have been recovered from the foot of Chicago's Lakeside Convention Center since 1978. And you probably remember hearing a couple years ago about how in just one night the Lakeside Convention Center took the lives of at least 961 birds who were beginning their annual migration south for the winter. But why did that happen? Well, the first reason is that Chicago sits directly under the Mississippi Flyway, a major migratory route used by 235 species of birds traveling between North, Central, and South America. And the second is the 120,000 square feet of windows on the convention center, which look like habitat by reflecting the surrounding trees and water, or just appear to be invisible. However, before the next fall migration, the building owners covered the windows with feather-friendly film, which features simple dots to break up the reflections and make the glass more visible. And the results so far have been incredible, as throughout fall 2024, only 18 bird deaths were recorded, down from 1,280 in 2023 and 771 in 2022. Now at least 9 other buildings in Chicago are installing the dots, and more broadly over the past few years, cities like New York and Washington have been making it mandatory for new or renovated buildings to include bird-safe materials on their lower windows.
Remember my name. If I packed all my things, you never saw me again. Remember that day.
I wasn't able to talk too much down there in the canyon just because it was so loud with all those incredible waterfalls, but hopefully all the B-roll that I've chucked in does it justice. But yeah, this place is absolutely incredible. Now for this next bit of good news, it turns out that human hair is being used to mop up oil spills. So right now, a lot of oil spills are cleaned up either by spraying chemicals that absorb the oil or sink it to the seabed, and in some cases, like with BP's Deepwater Horizon oil spill, parts of it are literally set on fire to burn it off. However, a hairdresser from Alabama had a different idea. After seeing an oil-covered otter, Phil McCrory wondered whether hair itself could absorb pollution, and after testing his theory in his garage, NASA scientists confirmed he was onto something. Phil then teamed up with Lisa Gautier to launch Matter of Trust, a non-profit that collects hair, fur, fleece, and even dryer lint from donors worldwide and transforms it into hair sausages and mats, which are essentially natural oil sponges. These hair mats aren't used in open water because they can become heavy and sink, however they're perfect for absorbing oil on beaches and along shorelines. Volunteers use them to help clean up after BP's Deepwater Horizon spill, and in cities like Garland and North Richmond, Texas, hair mats are being installed in storm drains to absorb oil washed off roads before it enters waterways. In total, since launching in 1998, Matter of Trust has provided over 300,000 hair sausages and 40,000 hair mats to cleanup efforts. And you might be thinking, well, that sounds great, but what do you do with all the oil-soaked hair mats? Well, instead of creating more waste, the mats are naturally broken down using mushrooms, thermal composting and worms, which are able to turn it back into healthy soil in around 18 months. Now, if any of you guys are thinking of doing this trail, be ready to get wet because I don't know if you can see everything falling above me. It is soaking in here. And so now we're at the Grand Canyon part of the walk, which is where it gets its name. And as you can see, it probably couldn't look any more different to the Grand Canyon over in the States, but yeah, just as incredible if you ask me. Now, this next bit of good news is all about the world's rarest penguin and how the South African government plans to protect 6 crucial breeding sites. So the African penguin is the only penguin species native to the African continent, and back in the 50s there were over 140,000 breeding pairs. However, today their population has plummeted by a staggering 93%, and scientists warn they could go extinct in less than 4,000 days. Believe it or not, the species was once literally used as fuel for ship boilers, and more recently they've been hit hard by habitat loss due to climate change, oil spills, and commercial overfishing, which has stripped the oceans of their food. But so last year, conservation groups took legal action arguing that the government wasn't properly enforcing fishing restrictions that were recommended by an independent scientific committee to protect the species. For example, some fisheries were being closed, but they were being closed in areas where the penguins didn't actually forage. But so now, to ensure the penguins can find enough food for themselves and their chicks, the government has banned sardine and anchovy fishing around 6 key breeding areas for at least the next 10 years. The decision builds on a long-term trial from 2008 to 2019, which found that closing fisheries significantly improved the penguins' ability to catch food, which was linked to an increase in survival and improved health of their chicks. And there's more hope on the horizon as conservation breeding programs have successfully released more African penguins into the wild, and thanks to this fishing ban, those penguins will be returning to a more balanced ecosystem with plenty to eat.
Remember my name. I packed all my things, never saw me again. Remember that day.
So that's all the good news that I could squeeze into this first good news hike, but please comment down below any positive news stories that you come across so I can include them next time. And yeah, hopefully that wasn't too bad. It will get much better, no doubt. But make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you over there.